This exchange to me was extremely illuminating because what we have here is the commissioner who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, and then we get a drive-by spray of propaganda, disinformation, and ideological attacks.
It seems that the goal of Big Pharma is to get people hooked on for life on their products, whether it be an annual flu or COVID-19 vaccines, perpetual statins or lower cholesterol, beta blockers for high blood pressure, expensive never-ending cancer treatments. Yet all this intervention doesn't seem to yield much fruit. As head of the FDA, would you like to take an opportunity to express your regret in failing to curtail the chronic disease epidemic in America?
Arizona MAGA lunatic Paul Gosar, an all out and about white nationalist, is trying to posture as an anti-big pharma warrior, which would be commendable if this wasn't the real focus of his vitriol, grilling the head of the FDA.
Just last month, a federal court forced the FDA to retract tweets and statements for its years-long smear campaign against ivermectin as an effective treatment for COVID-19.
Yes, vaccines have side effects. The risk of being dead is lower if you're vaccinated. I personally participate in clinical trials when I have the chance so that we can have the data and the knowledge to make wise decisions, for example, and get vaccinated so we're less likely to be dead.
I get that, but why did you have to retract everything you said about ivermectin? Because your office came out against ivermectin. Now, I agree that there's some problems in the manufacturing of that dosage, but if in doubt, leave it out.
Before Commissioner Califf gives Paul Gosar a lesson in basic science, his fighting for a gotcha moment and a good soundbite from Califf about ivermectin is a perfect caricature of today's Republican Party. A whole lot of political theater and cheap stunts at the expense of American lives.
We didn't retract everything we had to say about ivermectin. And in fact, you posited that we had an attack against ivermectin. Drugs are not.
I hope the courts are watching this right now because they ordered you to.
If you look at the randomized trials of ivermectin, and there are many of them now, there is no benefit of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID. That's a statement, just a fact. So it actually won a Nobel Prize because it's an amazing drug, both for animals and humans who have worms. And there was a good reason to think it may work in the case of COVID, and that's why, thankfully, the community, including the NIH, did a number of randomized clinical trials. There's just no benefit, and that's true of most things that we try. There's nothing wrong with thinking it might work. It just didn't.
You couldn't get much better of an answer during a congressional hearing than this. And to any rational person, this is how science and medicine should work. But to Gosar and the rest of the anti-vaxxers in Congress, it's a hill they're willing to die on, which is where Jamie Raskin comes in.
Let me try to sort some of this out, and maybe we'll help to illuminate why we have a Food and Drug Administration rather than leaving it to politicians in state legislatures or in Congress to make decisions based on ideological whim. Well, what about hydroxychloroquine, which was another thing that was advocated?
Basically the same story. There was really exciting preliminary work in the laboratory that said hydroxychloroquine may have activity against COVID, so the randomized trials were done. Unfortunately, no benefit. Again, nothing wrong with thinking it may work and trying it out in a randomized trial, but then we have the data now, so that leads you to the conclusions.
I'm aware of a lot of political attacks and criticism against the FDA, but I can never figure out the coherence of it. Sometimes they seem to be saying, get out of the way and just let anybody advocate whatever they want and use whatever they want without any testing and without the various protocols you go through. And then other times they attack you because you don't have enough authority to do the things that we would want you to do in order to make kids' cinnamon applesauce clean, for example. Last Congress, we passed a bipartisan bill to help address those shortages, but nearly 200 House Republicans voted against a second bill to give FDA resources to strengthen its oversight and inspection of facilities to prevent shortages like that from happening. So we can't have it both ways. If we want an effective, strong regulator, we've got to give them the authority and the resources to get the job done.
Regulating industries is about having standards, folks. Standards we should all be able to get behind. Consumers, workers, governments, and businesses. It just sets the table for mutual expectations. The problem is the 1%ers who own nearly all of our country's wealth, they don't want mutual accountability, which is why they do all they can to limit and crush regulation and keep labor from organizing. Profits over everything.
The scope of the issues that you have to address on a daily basis is staggering. The challenges faced by the FDA are mammoth, and we should not be adding to your burdens by beating you up for pet ideological causes. And I was disappointed that some of our colleagues went in that direction today. The Inflation Reduction Act is not responsible for drug shortages. And contrary to Republican claims, it's already substantially lowered costs for life-saving medications, even as it's projected to reduce the deficit by $237 billion. Republican opponents of the Inflation Reduction Act claim it's already stifled the production of brand-name drugs, which is just false. HHS recently published a white paper with multiple recommendations for what needs to be done to address drug shortages, none of which involve repealing the Inflation Reduction Act. Rather, they focus on ways in which the private sector can work with the FDA to shore up drug supply chains. And the commissioner has laid out a number of other ideas here today, and we would do well to defer to his expertise and to take it to heart. We'd also be remiss not to clarify that ivermectin is not effective against COVID-19. And there's no reason to think anything wrong of people who wanted to check it out for those purposes, as the good commissioner testified today, but it didn't work. The Fifth Circuit never said otherwise, and it is not the role of the Fifth Circuit to determine whether a drug is safe and effective, be it ivermectin or mifepristone. That's the FDA's job, and it's a job that relies on the quality and the integrity of the science and the research. Some of our colleagues chose to blame the FDA exclusively for infant formula shortages when they could have joined us on our side of the aisle in our investigation into Abbott Nutrition and its role that it played. Democrats never received all the documents we were promised by Abbott, and our friends across the aisle could choose to help with that and provide the American people the accountability and the transparency we all deserve.
But why won't government do more for us? Well, same reason. Because the one percenters are imposing their will with our elected officials too. Corruption, legalized bribery, that's lobbying, and conflicts of interest rule the day.